Hello, everyone. It's your boy Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. And we're here. We're halfway through the year of 2019 already. We've had some good films, some bad films, some just okay films. So after the jump, I'm going to talk to you about the five films that are my personal five favorite movies of the year so far. And we'll get into it after the jump. Now, before we get started, I do want to have two notes before we get into all of these. These are my personal favorite five films of the year. Uh, these are the movies that, after I left the theater for hours, days, weeks, they still stuck with me. They still had some type of resonance with me. And also, I'm not ranking them. I will do that at the end of the year when I do the end of the year top 10 films. Right now, these are the five films that mean the most to me so far with the year happening. I will rank them at another time, but for the purposes of this video, just because there's no confusion, I'm going to put them in the order of their release. So that way, like, oh, he named that one first. That must be his top favorite. That's not how it works. I'm just gonna do them and how they were released in the theaters. All right. So the first film that came out was back in February called Fighting with the Family, with Florence Pugh as Paige, Soraya Page, and The Rock playing The Rock himself. If you don't know, it's a film about a professional wrestler, female professional wrestler named Paige, who had come up with this family that was all into wrestling, and she got her one shot, and she had to go through all the rigors of being in a WWE training facility, not looking like the typical WWE diva, and having to kind of put her goals and dreams ahead, while her brother, who had the same things, didn't quite line up and mesh up. I think it's a great story. I think it's a great movie. Not being, if you're not a wrestling fan, I am, so that might be why it's a little higher for me. But I think even if you're not a wrestling fan, this is a good movie to see. Stephen Merchant directed it. He's also has a small part in it as well. But I think it's one of the, for this to have come out in February and it still is it's resonating with me. And I now am hearing people who are catching it on the airplane or catching it on the video. It's like, oh my God, have you seen Fighting with My Family? Like, yeah, I know, I am. And it's also one of the reasons why Florence Pugh is now one of my female actress crushes. Is just talent wise. Like, I saw Midsummer, and anything that she's in, I now want to take a look at. So, Fighting with My Family is my first. Next up, throughout the year, came out March 8th, called Us. Um, I love this movie. I saw it twice within about a week period, because the first time you see it, it's one of those movies you see it once, you're like, I don't think I saw or know what I thought I saw. And then you see it again, you're like, okay, some things are a little bit more fleshed out. What I loved about this movie definitely made it so that when you left the theater, you had to have a conversation. Like, I remember seeing people leaving the theater standing in the middle of the lobby just conversing about whatever the hell it is they just saw, whether they thought this was this, or whether they thought this was that, or whether the theory was this way, or what this meant. And it kind of made an experience which hasn't happened a lot in theaters lately. I know this movie is a lot less accessible than Jordan Peele's previous horror film, Get Out, which I think is a little bit more straightforward in what it was trying to tell. This one's a little bit more abstract and kind of doing a little bit more things. But I love, one, I will say that Jordan Peele is definitely visually improved as a director, visually, and I think Lupita murdered this roles, both sides, if you will. And I know horror never gets a look for Oscar contention, because Toni Collette should have got something for Hereditary. I think she should have her name brought about when Us finally gets put up for nominations. I don't think it'll win, because I don't think it's as accessible as other films. A little too abstract. Some people hated it, some people loved it. For me, I loved it as a movie and as a talking point, as a think piece. My third was April 26th, probably the biggest film. Let me remove the biggest film, box office wise, of the year, and a culmination of 22 some odd films with Avengers Endgame. While I'm still haven't quite figured out where I'm ranking this film in the MCU lore, because that's a hard pill to swallow. I think this is a movie that needs almost all of those other movies to sort of exist. It acts as a final as a season finale, or I'm sorry, a series finale for a bunch of episodes. So standing on its own, sometimes it's hard to kind of rank it, but I do think it is a great culmination. It gives a lot of great send-offs. It's a great coming together of a lot of storylines that just should not work. And it's a perfect, for me, coda or button or send-off for a lot of characters that I have been with for the last decade plus. I don't know. I still think I like Infinity War better as a solo movie, but if I'm putting them together, I think it's a great arc to finish that film off. And there's nothing really else to say about Avengers Endgame except for I love you 3000, and then we all start crying, drinking again. But it's a great movie. I've seen that movie so many times in theaters, and it's a 3 hour flick. That's how, for me, did not feel like 3 hours. I know some people say it does. It didn't feel like that for me because I was so invested with those characters. I think when you've got a hook in where the characters matter to the audience, the time doesn't really matter anymore. I think you start feeling length of time of films when movies just don't hook you in with either the concept or the cast. My fourth film of the year came out in May 24th, called Booksmart, directed by Olivia Wilde. I adored this movie. I loved it on a couple of facts. That one, it was like young girls getting able to do the coming of age story when we've always seen it so many times from the viewpoint of guys. And I love that it was just as raw and real for young girls who are questioning their purpose in school and education and life and sexuality and relationships. All of that bundled into one tightly, well-directed, very funny comedy that worked for me on so many levels. And I think you should see it. I've heard some people saying that, like, oh, kids don't act like that, or when one or girls shouldn't be that way. I call BS. One, not all kids act that way. Some act another way. What you do in your household, kudos to you. Don't quite know what your kids are doing when they're not around you all the time, but that's for another subject. What I will say is, it is thrilling to see that what we've always allowed guys to do in these coming of age R-rated comedies and American Pie and like Euro Trip and all of those type of movies, you finally get to kind of allow that to happen and see it through the eyes of young women, directed by women, written by women. That's you can't beat that. I think to do all of that and it worked and it works well, that means a lot. And then my final film is probably is the most recent, came out in June, called The Last Black Man in San Francisco. It was one of my hidden gems, as was Booksmart, I believe. But it's a movie about gentrification, about family, about life. It's gorgeous. It is a beautiful, beautifully shot movie. If you haven't seen it, I'm not sure if it's all still around that much anymore at the main theaters, but if you have an art house theater or an independent theater near you, you should check it out. But it is a stunning film. It's 2 hours plus, but I don't feel it. I think it's 2 hours on the dot actually, but you don't feel it. It's a great story of being displaced without someone asking or telling or even acknowledging that you're there. You're just told to move on. And it's hard to do that. And anyone who's ever been in a city that's been gentrified or have been the people that have moved into a city that got rid of an original group of people or group of life or way of life, I think it's fascinating to see both sides, and you kind of gives a heartbeat to both the people that are being persecuted and moved out of their homes and out of their families, and the people who are doing the moving. It's a beautiful movie. Now, those are my five. There are a couple other films that I like. Some are just on the cusp, so I haven't had enough time to sit with them to know if they still resonate with me. Two of them being Toy Story 4 and Spider-Man Far From Home. They could still end up on my top 10, but those are the five that from January to June, those are the ones that meant the most to me and resonated with me. What were your top five films of the year so far? Go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. If you haven't, like, share, subscribe, ring that bell. First 500 folks that become a member of the channel, I'll give somebody something nice for letting everybody know about the place, all right? You can hit us up on email at hollywoodalreadydidit@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at hollywoodadi. We also have a podcast by the same name that is on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts, you know? Last episode, we talked about Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm not sure. I believe Lion King is what's next on the docket. But you can find that anywhere the podcasts are played. But I think we've had a good top of the year. Not great. We've had some good movies. Some that I haven't even mentioned. John Wick would be one of those. What are some of your favorites? If I haven't mentioned them, go ahead and leave your comments. If you have, let me know. But I think the rest of the year is going to be pretty solid. We got some couple of things that I'm really interested in. I want to see The Kitchen, Three from Hell. There are a couple of others. Hobbs and Shaw. So it's going to be fun. It's not going to be a great movie, but it's going to be fun. Those are the type of movies that I'm looking for. Jumanji looks fun. What are you looking forward to? Go ahead and leave those in the comments as well. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours?